Among the fields that grow and sway, with their branches woven tight, turn the day into night, cup the water to our lips and see the sun dancing in the echoes of our life. Feel the salt burning, carried in the air. Give us strength to finish this prayer. We walk, talk, heal, and pray. Through the charcoal ashes of despair, as the acrid smoke of carbon is carried in the air, for every hard word trickled down.
Hello once again. If you were present at the original talk on the Naked U.F.O, or the plasma active craft, you would have taken away with you an electronic copy of the entire book. At the time you would have been asked to respect my copyright, and if you did that you would also be asked if you'd like to make a small donation to Help for Heroes or the British Legion Poppy Appeal. Having said that, the reason that I wrote the book, The Naked U.F.O, or the Plasma Active Craft, is that I wanted people to understand the conflict of the World War and how science on one side advanced at an incredible pace, and science on the Allies side also advanced. But it was not the science that advanced on the Allies side, but the engineering skills that enabled us to mass produce things very rapidly and literally outproduce the Axis powers. But one of the Axis powers, namely, and we're going to have to use this expression, Nazi Germany, tried to hit back, so to speak, with the most advanced technology that they could come up with. And there's masses of books have been written about the work done at Peenemünde on rocket propulsion, pulse jets, and of course the conspiracy theory of the Nazi UFO. So what I wanted to do in the book, The Naked UFO Set Plasma Free, was to create a backdrop for this conspiracy that would say, what if the Americans got hold of the wrong set of plans and gave them to vido of Canada? And what if somebody else managed to get hold of the right set of plans and sat on them? So my whole book is based on a second set of plans. Now, whilst I've been speaking, you've been looking at a Don Danigon on the screen or on your computer. This is basically a 10-sided figure. The question that is a rhetorical question is, if you were to place a pulse jet on every side, you'd have 10 pulse jets. Would you have 10 pulse jets on your Don Danigon? Would you have 5 pulse jets? And the answer to this rhetorical question is that you would have 5, because what would happen is that you had 5, the Don Danigon would spin round as if it was a firework, a Catherine wheel. But because of the rotational speed of the created by the pulse jets, you would start to see centrifugal force, which is throwing out the pulse jet exhaust, combining with centripetal force that wants to pull that thrust inwards. So with 5 pulse jets you could begin to get a ring of burning paraffin. Now, because this ring of burning paraffin is taking place underneath a circular aerofoil, it is now forcing one exhaust thrust into the air intake of its partner or alternative pulse jet. This gives the effect of burning out the, we call them Venetian blinds, the open and close, which gives the pulse jet its pop, pop, pop sound, hence the word buzz bomb, for which it was primarily used for, the world's first cruise missile, but I digress. Now, once you've burnt it out, you then get to the position where you basically created a ramjet, and your ring of burning paraffin is now a continuous ring. We can go right back now to the late 70s and the work that the late Professor Desti did on using a very lightweight fibre but very strong, a polyester reinforced fibre woven, one of the early examples of using carbon fibre reinforced with 5 micron fibre drawn fibres, which is something that hasn't yet been done, but it was under Math Web at BP Research Centre, as I say, in the late 70s, early 80s. Professor Desti did produce a circular aerofoil, and he did produce some depleted uranium cans. And his idea was, once he'd built his silo, was to use a jet engine, which he'd already had, bleed off the air from the cold compressor, and start spinning the disc round with the compressed air going into the cans, and then, when it was at a certain velocity, light the paraffin inside the cans to see if he could produce a ring of burning paraffin. I arrived just at the time when he was having problems with the health and safety. So his concept of using a jet engine had to be shelved. So when I came along and suggested that one could strike an electrical plasma underneath the circular aerofoil, then he was curious to know how I would set about doing this. Now, in your shall we say, your goodie bag, you will find an elastic band and a match. Now, we have all done this at school. We have taken the elastic band and put it between 2 fingers and used the other hand to twist the tourniquet match through the elastic band until it's tight enough to try to squeeze your fingers together, and then you lose control of the match and it spins out. A great bit of fun and an interesting way of passing some time when you're bored or daydreaming. The question asked is, can you do that electrically? Now, let's go back to the controversy of the Nazi UFO and the bell. Let us assume that someone came up with the idea of building a rotating disc, but this time the disc would carry with it a series of horseshoe magnets, i.e. A magnetic metal, which in turn would one magnet. So we say, if we look at the Don Danigon and say that each of those red lines is actually a horseshoe magnet. Now, each horseshoe magnet is linked in series to its partner. Now, in between the 2 horseshoe magnets, the wire coming off one horseshoe collector, which is what we're going to call it, is curled round to make almost a tuning coil. Now, everything is wired as a continuous loop or a daisy chain or in series. Now, the inspiration behind this configuration was that in 1930, a British professor called Professor Nichols postulated that if it was possible to take a copper disc and spin it at 1500 RPM, but make it, wait for it, 5 meters in diameter, then you would be able to earth the periphery and earth the center, and you will be able to see by the purely mechanical movement of the light electrons that would not flow to the nearest Earth, which would be the Earth's centre or the periphery, but you would be able to measure an electric current as the electrons moved from one Earth to another. In other words, the centrifugal force would pull the electrons across the disk. As the Earth has a weak magnetic field, this would generate an EMF within the spinning copper. So far, so good. Professor Nichols noted his experiments, wrote a paper, and the rest was forgotten. So the answer is, how does our Don Danigon, with its 5 pulse jets and its rotating stator of magnetic metal turned into electromagnets by means of cutting the Earth's magnetic field. Now, what is the fixed component? The fixed component, of course, is the rotor itself, which does not revolve. Now we have a rotating stator round a fixed rotor. These are a permanent magnet rotor, and the magnets stay in situ. Basically, it's a DC motor where we're rotating the stator against the fixed magnets, or a rotor over fixed magnets. So there's nothing new in that. The interesting part is there are no brushes. So what we're doing, as we increase the power of the electromagnets, and as they are receiving pulses from each permanent magnet as it passes through the horseshoe, we are gradually making the magnets stronger and stronger until the amount of energy needed to rotate the rotor cannot be met. This brings us back to our elastic band between our finger and thumb, or our 2 fingers. At a certain time, the match will slip out of our hands, just as in the conspiracy theory of the Nazi UFO, the whole device locks up and then unwinds. But it unwinds at such a velocity as to start to give not initially ionization and then pair annihilation. Whether that's pronounced correctly is a matter of conjecture, but this is where you strip the electrons so fast from the air atoms as you begin to rip the air atoms apart. So you produce burning hydrogen and ozone, and this is an atmospheric plasma. The temperature is exceedingly high, but this is a rotating toroidal magnetic plasma held in a magnetic field of its own making. This is going to suck vast amounts of electrons from either the top of the disk or the fabric of the disk. Now, if you read through my book and you look at the slides, you will see how I have watered this down so that an engineer can appreciate how I got from this introduction to something which can be practically done before they move on to what I have suggested in this introduction. Thank you very much indeed.
Are we all so selfish that we choose to ignore a beautiful world that will soon be no more? Are we all so greedy that we strip our land bare? Our proud tall trees will lie down in despair. We believe we can change our love. We believe we can change our love. You feel the pain that's raging in your hear us, help us play our part. Will we love those blue skies? The sunshine burns us out. Save our clouds and tomorrow's deathly drought. Learn to love our homelands. Value clouds, please not greed. Money will not grow our food. Water's what we need. We believe we can change your